Hi, everyone. My project for our poetry sponsorship was In Country, a book of poetry by Hugh Martin, whom I actually had the opportunity to interview, which I will share with you all in a couple of minutes. But first, I thought I'd give you some information, some background about Hugh Martin. He's from Ohio, spent 6 years in the Army National Guard, and in 2004 was deployed to Iraq. Some of his other works include So How Was the War from 2010, The Stick Soldiers in 2013, and then, of course, In Country in 2018, which is the book that I chose to read. It's excellent. I highly recommend it. Martin has won many awards, including a Wallace Stegner Fellowship from Stanford University. His work has been published in several places, including The New Yorker, and he won the 2014 and 15 Emerging Writer Lecturer at Gettysburg College. And currently he teaches writing at Ohio University and is working on his PhD. And I discovered in my interview with him that he's working more with prose lately, so I'm excited to see what comes out with that because I really love his poetry. So In Country includes reflections on Martin's experiences in Iraq when he was deployed. And the poems that I have chosen to share with you, I just want to read them and, have you reflect on them, see what you make of them rather than me telling you what I think of them necessarily, because my interview, it's about 36 minutes long, so I don't want to take up too much of all of your time. The first one I'm going to start with is called In Country. That's where the book gets its title from. In Country. Sad mothers gaze at the flagpole, which is wetted by the sun. Stars forever, stars at night. Fadil al-Azawi. We called it like my uncle called his months in Saigon. Slow addition of nights and days away from the States. 365 and a wake up, we'd say. The sandbox, the desert, over there. Or just there. Where, missing my own mother, I pushed an Iraqi boy from a courtyard while his mother watched. Where I wore, sewn to the right shoulder sleeve, the flag, real, red, white, and blue star field facing forward, like Gideon bearers hoisting the colors in my country's revolution. When worn in this manner, Army regs say, it gives the effect of the flag flying in the breeze as the wearer moves forward. In Country, Mongols turned the Tigris red, then black with ink. Uruk, Sumerian city, which Iraq, some say, comes from the Latin contra, opposite, against. In Country, Mashuf canoes drifted through marshes of green reeds, original Eden. In Country, marbled teal and black-crowned night heron. In Country, a black hawk hovered above the rebuilt ziggurat of your photographs. Just clicks from base. Some boys burned a flag on a street. Dozens of feet stomping and jumping upon the fiery cloth like a broken trampoline. Toby Keith played for us in Country. We ate with Iraqi soldiers, Thanksgiving dinner in Country. Countdowns we kept in ink on cardboard walls of naked women ripped from shiny magazines. Country matters, Hamlet called it. In Country, Iraqis took holidays near the always blue Dokan Lake all fucking day, a soldier said when asked, how long you been in Country? A man in a baklava cafe crossed his legs, lifted his sandal's heel for me to see as he held his tea in Country. 2 shoes thrown at my commander-in-chief in Country. The farmer said he thinks America when planes dot the sky of his country. In Country, kids ran off after throwing rocks, which pelted our armored trucks. Our gunners, in Country, ducked and yelled at the kids' footsteps, down alleys where curtains rustled from open windows, yelled as a woman walked out with a broom, looked at our trucks, then beat dust from a long rug sprawled over a plastic chair, which, as she hit it, shook and shook. The next poem that I'd like to share with all of you is called Indirect Fire. Indirect fire, FOB Cobra. Wolfie's head inside his duffel. He's looking for headphones. It's hell, I'd say, said, hearing that Pantera-sounding shit blast from your laptop speakers. His head's in that duffel still when we hear the air outside swallow itself. And the explosion, the boom, my stomach pumped quick with one quick wind gust. Get down, he whispers, as if it matters. We get down like dogs because the sandbags we'd stacked outside half-assed are 5 feet high. And then we hug the floor. From here I see a mound of baby powder left where Lemon likes to stand and shake too much on his crotch. With our rifles, we run from the tent, heads down, my hand on Wolfie's back, in the desert night so dark I can't see his lunging shape. Gathered against Hesco walls of dirt, our platoon crouches, silent, listening for the next noise metal in the sky will make. I turn the switch, the nods click. Now I see my platoon's collage of camouflaged bodies, static green wedged against dirt barriers. It is just our first. We wait. Everyone shuts up. Everyone holds still. Some men hold on to the gravel. Next, I'd like to share with you one entitled Suspicious Duffel Bag, LSA Anaconda. This one is interesting because the format is a little bit different. It almost reminds me of prose rather than poetry. Excuse me. So, Suspicious Duffel Bag. That bag's not mine, someone says. We watch it as if it might move. The bag's a green island in the motor pool gravel. The bag's left over from some tired battalion that boarded a plane to Kuwait. The bag's full of some private's unused cold weather camo. The bag's like the one dropped in the dining hall by a local worker that blew in Mosul. Men step from their tents to see the bag. Oh, come on, Kenzen says. It's just some guy's shit. But no one will walk to the bag, pull open its flaps, see what's inside. You know whose bag? Some sergeant says to 2 men walking from chow. They stop and walk the long way around our tents. No, one guy says, but that bag looks suspicious. In the silence, I can hear the bag's brief explosion, its spray of steel shards, nails, the green nylon shred to scraps, the bags stuffed with little purple hearts, the bags stuffed with titanium prosthetic legs etched with American flags, the bags filled with service member life insurance forms. The bags full of little men dressed in Class A's who pace down sidewalks and knock on doors. The bags full of names of the dead, newspaper clippings. Lieutenant says, I'm not taking a chance. He calls base headquarters about the bag. I promise you, Kenzen says, it's just some dumb fuck's bag of porn. Lieutenant asks, you want to check? No one, not even Kenzen, will approach the bag. The bag is like that one, full of tomatoes we blew in Balad. The bag's like the shoebox that blew and knocked out Smith. 4 men from EOD order us to back away from the bag. The bag was stolen from the PX. The bag was dropped by a local worker. The bag was gently filled with a large mortar round wired to blow by the same worker, watching, on this base that's built like a city. We sit against the bunker's concrete wall. Fire in the hole, a sergeant yells. All this, Kenzen says, because some dumbass left his bag. Bag of gear, bag of porn, bag of legs, gone, one sound. The next poem that I'd like to share with you all is called 50 Cal Gunner, a sequence, and I asked Hugh Martin a little bit about this in the interview that I'll show you here in a couple of minutes. So 50 Cal Gunner, a sequence. Anthem. All day I aim at date palms. The hood's covered with dried stains. Dip, coffee, I've spit. Dalton always yelling from the hole. Not on my truck, Dick. Dust here, dust there. How many duds don't blow, I don't know. Inside the Kevlar, another song stuck, even over the constant mosque music. I'm into having sex, not into making love. But I'm not having, not making. Dalton says it's my anthem. My wish to make devices exploded, improvised. I keep both thumbs on the butterfly. This camouflage keeps my vitals very much part of the sand I stare down all day. Lieutenant says the 50 should make people unhappy. At home, they don't know all I do. Aim at date palms. Been hit with a few shells, but I don't walk with a limp. But mostly we drive, and I aim at date palms. I saw what it said in all the fine print below: mission accomplished. Accomplished, of course, but please send 4,000 plus body bags. Bring them back, please. No empties. This next one that I'm going to share is called Test Fire. South of Jalawa. After we drive through the barren hills where the earth unrolls itself for miles, where the soil's as stale as boxed cookies sent from the Youngstown USO, the gunners fire machine guns at the ridge wall's face. Small dust explosions lift to the sky like faded desert larks, while the rest of us shoot from our knees, our chests, as copper casings rain like loose change across the dirt. Then, as we convoy back to Cobra from nowhere, the Bedouin come to collect the shells and stuff them in sacks. And after they go, only boot and footprints, a careful cursive of tire tracks. This next poem is entitled Intravenous. It is the last poem in the book, but I will share with you one other one that is my favorite as well. Intravenous. The smoke's a black rope rising from the village. How many days did I sit in the barracks at Bragg staring at maps of this place as if it had saved me? On this street, I couldn't say, in the roar of police sirens and mosque music, which ways east-west, which ways the river. Doc's on his knees beside the white opal's open door. The girl, months old, screams, the glass spread around her like rock salt on the seat cushions. Blue leggings wet, stuck to the skin with her own blood. Light, Doc says, light. I lift the M4. Doc scissors the cotton sleeve, pushes his thumb to her arm for a vein. Nothing. He brushes back the dozen or so black hair strands and finds it. Eye to hairline, pulsing. See? He says. See? His fat hand grips her head hard, flexing the vessel. On that smooth forehead, the vein runs in a curve that's like, for a moment, the Tigris I've seen on maps. It's not, I know. I keep my rifle pointed through the shattered window as cars filled with wounded weave around us in the dust. Hold still, Doc says. Then he lowers, slowest thing I've ever seen, the needle to this blue-green vein, and I keep the M4's mounted light aimed, a small yellow ray beaming from below the barrel, steady toward her head, in Doc's hand, to help him see. And the last one I'd like to share with you is On a Jalala Street. I know I keep mispronouncing that word, and even though Hugh Martin explains to me in the interview when I was able to speak with him how to pronounce it, I know it's difficult, so bear with me. This one is my favorite because of the the allusion to a poem by William Carlos Williams throughout, so I asked Hugh Martin about that quite a bit. So my last one, and then I'll share our interview. So on a Jalala Street. Too easy, they said, to say the man's bruised face was like a plum's cold skin. Cold, blue plum, I'd written. Plus, those plums made them think of William's plums. And did we want that? Here's what happened. We'd heard shouts from somewhere near the police station. Shouts, I mean screams, I mean a sound that tore through Jalala's curfew. Just a man yelling for his dear fucking life. We saw 6, maybe 7 police in a small circle. On the ground, the man in the middle of the circle. The men kicked whatever limb or hip or ear just happened to be there as the man writhed and shook. Very carefully, an officer turned his rifle, holding the muzzle with both hands. Then he swung it like you'd swing a tennis racket, perhaps a baseball bat. But the man kept moving, ducking. So the officer just stopped the useless swinging and instead smashed the wooden butt straight to the man's bloodied face. Through flashes in that space where the officer pulled back the rifle so he could load up to do it again, I saw the face. Blood and blue skin shining in the dark like skin on a plum, though I did not think plum. Our lieutenant yelled and pushed through the circle as the officer, now tired, put in 1, 2, 3 more. The man breathed heavily. As he lay there in his own piss, I saw his eyes shut, sealed with swollen skin. This isn't to say this incident, just one small evening event, is to showcase some soldiers saving men from beatings. We mostly weren't. This is just to say how that man's face looked, but what's it matter? Dr. Williams maybe could have fixed that face. We do know after eating those plums, the plums that weren't his. He's sorry. He is. He even asks for forgiveness. All right. Thank you for listening to me reading these poems by Hugh Martin from In Country. Again, I highly recommend them. And here is my video. So you finally have something to look at besides a blank screen of my interview with Hugh Martin. Oh, also, I apologize. My 6-year-old daughter makes an appearance, and I'm not very tech savvy, so I was unable to figure out how to edit her out. But yes, I did this at home, so she does interrupt us, so I apologize for that. Here we go. Nope. Read a couple of interviews that you've done before, hopefully so I don't repeat questions you've already had.
Oh, don't worry about it, yeah.
Well, just in case. I know you write in poetry, and I've read a couple of statements that you had on that. Like in one interview, you said that prior to taking that creative writing class, you preferred prose, or you read a lot more prose than you did before. And so I wondered, have you considered writing your experiences in that way?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And no, it's very appropriate question right now because the PhD that I'm basically about to finish, it's my specialty or concentration is creative nonfiction. So I've been writing many more essays, and some of them more journalistic, research-based, some of them very personal, some of them more memoirish. So yeah, I have been doing more prose, and it's just like for me, I use a metaphor, it's just like a longer ball game. You know, you're spending more time working on like a longer piece or an essay and doing research. Whereas with poetry, I can look at a draft of a poem I'm working on and I can like consume it all in 30 seconds. You know, I just have it right there. With prose, it's kind of like really thinking about organization and separating it out. But yeah, so to answer, I am working on more prose. And honestly, I've and I tell my students this too because it's just relevant. It helps them. I'm writing prose about some of the same things that I've written poetry about, but it's just prose gives me more ability to kind of reflect or add exposition or take it in different directions. And so yeah, I am writing more prose now, and not as much poetry recently, honestly. So
okay. Do you have a preference?
That's a good question. Yeah, the more I'm doing prose, I want to stick to poetry because I don't know, I'm able to get more done and I'm able to kind of basically work on a few different poems at the same time and develop them. Whereas with prose, like I was saying, you got to, you have to get so kind of focused in on the overall organization and the project that it just takes months and months to get something more polished and complete. Whereas poetry, I can kind of like, yeah, I feel like I get more done, and so, and also, this is the main thing. And I think Brad or Maudlin, he would talk about this too, or he would agree. But with poetry, if you have a bad poem, it's very easy to just throw it aside or push it away or toss it out. If you're working on a prose piece for 6 months and it's going nowhere, or you're, unenthusiastic, it's much harder for me to like just say, "Oh, screw it, that's 6 months of wasted time."
Oh, yeah, that's
yeah, you know what I mean.
Yeah, so, that makes sense.
Yeah.
You mentioned that poetry had allowed you to find solace and distance yourself from your experiences. Have you heard from any readers of your books and your poems who maybe felt the same way, like specifically veterans at all?
Yeah, very good question. Try to think. I will say I could just give a quick story because I was talking the other day about it with someone, but I gave a reading actually in upstate New York a few years ago, and it was one of the strangest things ever. And I've been very fortunate to be able to give readings here and there. But at this particular reading, it was on Veterans Day, and after the reading was over, kind of an older gentleman came up to me. He said he was a Vietnam veteran, and he, complimented a lot of the work and the poems, and we talked a little bit. And the strange thing was, he gave me $100 bill, and he said that when he came back from Vietnam, a World War II veteran kind of talked to him and gave him $100, and he said, basically keep this, so to say, and give it to another veteran. And so he was like giving it to me. Yeah, and it was the kindest, but also like one of the strangest things. And so I do think like that was a moment where him listening to the poems and the work, it kind of, I don't know if it gave him solace, but it definitely like created this connection, and it allowed him to kind of maybe, have maybe think about certain memories, or just basically share a space with someone else who had been through a similar situation, maybe. And so yeah, and I've had other more recent veterans tell me that certain poems spoke to them, or that they really like identified with something. So yeah, it does happen, but if it happens more out there, I hope it does, but
yeah.
So yeah. Good question.
That's really awesome.
Yeah, thank you. That was a weird story. Yeah, but I always remember that. I was like, that's so strange.
Oh yeah, how could you forget that? That's...
I know that never happens. Yeah,
yeah, that's amazing. So, sorry, it's my youngest.
Oh, don't worry about it.
I'm in my interview. Not right now. Maybe later. Okay. Yeah, maybe. Okay. Sorry.
No problem. No
she's
worries.
6, so she's
got a lot to say. Yeah.
Yes. Oh. So in that same interview I read, and I forget which ones they are, admittedly, because like I said, it's been hectic lately, and I've just been reading everything I can here and there. You mentioned something about when you struggle with writing, it has something to do with not feeling like you're giving it justice, or doing it justice, I guess. Like maybe with that particular form or that particular genre and so forth. So how do you decide in the end that, okay, this is fine, I'm just done, it's time?
Yeah.
Oh,
it does. No, it makes total sense. But that's, I don't know if I have a good answer. But yeah, that's something I think I struggle with, as most writers struggle with. But I would say, I think there's just a point where, I mean, you know what I mean, with time and everything, you're working on something so much. It could be anything. Where if you're getting so upset and frustrated that, and I don't want to put like a specific time limit on it, but maybe it's something like you're spending an hour or two. And, I mean, this happens to me every few weeks, and like most writers are, you'll spend an hour or two and you just don't like how it sounds. You don't like what you're writing. You're kind of you're getting more sick of it, frustrated. I think one of the biggest skills that any writer can have, or artist, or whatever, is just to know when to walk the hell away. Like just to get up and go take a walk, or go, do something else. I don't know. For me, it's like do grading, or go work out, or go do laundry. Just anything else to kind of get away from it, because you're just spending more time with something and ultimately making it worse. And so I've tried to learn over the years to just, if I'm not into something and I'm going to waste even like a half hour just kind of bickering with myself over it, I need to just get away. And so as far as knowing when something is finished or complete, I think it is at that point where I just decide, like, this is the way it is, and I'm going to submit it places like this. And if I feel maybe skeptical, then I'll just put it aside for a month or 6 months, or even in some cases, for years. And so it's just kind of knowing when to do that, and also just having good readers like friends or family, whoever, just looking at something for me and telling me that it needs this or that, or that it doesn't need this. So yeah, really just kind of by instinct, I guess. But I mean, that's a great question. It's something I think everyone just struggles with.
If you can, I don't know, I tend to think about it all the time. I don't just do that with my writing, but school too, with teaching.
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell myself I need a break, and then I'll go do something else, and that's all I think about is everything. I don't know if that's healthy, but
maybe it's normal. Yeah, it's like an obsession. Yeah,
I don't know. I've read of other people doing that too, but it still doesn't seem like you're really taking a break from it.
No, you're not. Yeah, but you got to try. I guess you just try to do step away. So
yeah, that's true. So when you write essays and nonfiction, you mentioned something about truth and how you don't like to use that word. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I think, most nonfiction writers would say something like that word. It's just, it's so complicated, and there's so many things associated with it, and it's just so difficult that when you say something is the truth, people have so many different ideas about what that word means. So it's kind of useless to use it unless you kind of set up a clear set of guidelines and a clear definition, so you're all on the same page. So I would say, even if I'm teaching some students, I would say something like, well, truth in this case is just, it's kind of the concrete, very literal, physical things that you can remember, that you can recall. However, when you're writing like an essay, for example, I don't think you should ever add details or add things or embellish, but you can absolutely, go back and look at it through a different frame. You can add emotions that are maybe there, but you didn't know they were there at the time. So that's like the voice of innocence versus experience. And you can, because what's really important, it's not the truth of what happened. Like, it's never really about what exactly happened. It's about how it made you feel, what were the results of it, why you remember it the way you do, and all of the larger, I guess, like metaphorical meanings around it. Because any good story usually has a meaning beyond just what it says. Even if if you're telling any story, it's going to have a different meaning than what literally happened. So, or something like deeper. And so, I just think truth is, for nonfiction, yeah, it's based on what happened, but it's also the writer's job to figure out, well, what are maybe the details or certain moments that you can really tell a reader, and they can kind of feel it like you did, because that really involves like knowing what to omit and also what to keep, and things like that. So that's why, yeah, I just, in truth, and like, what is truth anyway, right? Then there's the extreme idea. Once you take anything from memory and put it down on paper, you're inevitably lying in some ways, because you're leaving out certain things. It's been filtered through memory, so maybe you're adding things that you don't know you're adding, or you're emphasizing something that wasn't emphasized. So that's there too, right? So there's just truth is just, it's so fuzzy, it's so complicated, and no one really knows, I guess what it really is, And some people even say reshaping a story, or reorganizing it, or bringing in, I don't know, research or other other moments to like braid it with something that's also that's not truth, like that's fictional or something like that. So there's just a lot of debates about what nonfiction is and what is the truth. So that's why I am hesitant to use it. But I think there's so many writers just like pushing the boundaries today or pushing the envelope and figuring out what that means. So
yeah. I like your answer a lot. It gets me thinking that even maybe the genre that you choose to write an experience in has a huge impact on it too. Especially considering like poetry, you're condensing so much. At least the way I look at it, to convey more of the emotion behind it and not necessarily the events behind it. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, definitely condensing is part of it. Major part of it.
Right. Thank you for that. I was just curious.
No problem. No problem.
So I already touched on that. So I know you're writing more prose now. However, my favorite poem in Country, which is the book that I chose to read for my project, and I'm going to butcher this name, I know, on Jalala Street. Did I say it right? I did.
No, I'm gonna give you the true answer. When we were there, right, we like Anglicanize it or whatever, so we said it in Jalala, Jalula, Jalila, Jalala. But I have an Iraqi friend who says Jalala. So it's like, and it has a weird sound. So honestly, Jalula, Jalala, it's all there's many different ways to say it. So you're right, yeah.
Okay, I knew that was going to happen, but that's one of my favorites in the collection. And I noticed the allusion right away to This Is Just to Say by William Carlos Williams, which actually is not one of my favorite poems, but I could, even before you mentioned Williams' name in the poem, I was like, plums. You say, or the speaker says in the poem, I saw the face, blood and blue skin shining in the dark like skin on a plum, though I did not think plum. And so that just got me thinking, which I realize the speaker and the poet are different. But what did inspire that comparison?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, great question. If I'm thinking about that poem, if to answer like what literally inspired it, it's so boring, but maybe unexpected. I don't know, but it is the idea just coming back and being in writing workshops where you're writing something about Iraq. It's just very foreign to a lot of the people in the room, and kind of getting responses that are, I think, like honest and sincere and genuine, but also just kind of seeing like the limits of language and seeing that no matter what you compare it to, it's going to be problematic, it's going to be inaccurate. And so I think the inspiration is literally just about being at home and being trying to talk to civilians about certain situations with the war, and in this case, like graduate students, connecting that word plum with, as Williams is very famous plums, because if you say plum in a poem today, I mean, of course you can say it, and people might say, "Oh, it doesn't have that connection." But if you're writing poetry in America and you're talking about plums, there's a lineage to that plum poem because it's so famous. So it does come from this. Yeah, it's kind of the tone of the poem. It's so dark and haunting. It's about violence, whatever. But it was, I think, previously called like After Writing Workshop or something like that. So it's about kind of being in workshop, even though I took all that out because I thought I don't know, I didn't want to keep it in there, but yeah, about that experience of seeing how readers kind of how they react to certain words and bring these connections that you didn't know maybe were there, and just the problem of simile, taking something that happened literally in like Mesopotamia or something in modern day Mesopotamia and comparing it to some 20th century poet or some image that that poet made, and trying to like bridge that connection, but also showing how weak it is and how tenuous it is. So that's kind of what I was thinking about. But it's definitely that's probably one of the few poems that was inspired by being in a writing workshop, essentially. With people who are they had master's degrees in English. So yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad you know that poem. I'm sure Maudlin talks about it maybe. So
Well, no, I just knew it from before. I mean,
did you know it? Okay, great.
yeah, I knew it from before. So as soon as I read it, I was like, And then your references to Dr. Williams, and then the part in the end about forgiveness, which I thought was probably the most poignant part for me.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really loved that one. Like I said, even though I'm not a fan of This Is Just to Say, I still really enjoyed the way that you like juxtaposed them.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. So that said, which poets do you do? Okay, which poets inspire you the most?
Yeah, God, there's been some that are just really consistent for the last since I came home, I guess from Iraq, and I've been reading, fairly a lot of contemporary work and like 20th century work, whatever. But I would say Bruce Weigel's a poet, and because he's from Ohio, he's a Vietnam veteran. I've read all of his books, and I kind of know him a little bit, or I've been able to meet him, fortunately. So Bruce Weigel, another Vietnam veteran poet, Yusuf Komunyakaa, who's just well known for writing poetry not only about Vietnam but also about many other topics. Another Vietnam veteran poet, Ed Mikus, is wonderful. And I do think a lot of the Vietnam era poets inspire me, and we look back to them because they were just doing work that was really I don't know, it was breaking out of a form, and it was writing in this free verse, and it was using language that was very colloquial, but it was also kind of reckoning with the ideas of maybe feeling so distant from a country because they were considered to be like in a bad war, or a war that was wasteful. And of course, like all war is generally bad, it's all wasteful. But as opposed to like World War II, the Vietnam veterans were very often treated. They weren't treated that well, and they were just kind of wanted to be forgotten. So I think a lot of Iraq, Afghanistan veterans identify with that because although I think it's the opposite, where we're treated with like blanket support and appreciation and thanks, because there is no draft, it's like literally less than 1% served. So most people have no emotional connection to the wars really, unless you like know someone who served, and obviously, most people don't. And so a lot of those Vietnam veterans spoke to me, but also World War One poets like Wilfred Owen, Isaac Rosenberg, Siegfried Sassoon, Robert Graves, and so I just say, poets like that. There are many other ones. James Wright, Ohio poet. I'm always reading his work, or looking into his work. So yeah, those are a few. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think of it that way. I've got a lot of family who are veterans, and then my best friend I grew up with was over in Iraq as a truck driver, and so I mean, it sounds like that's not something that's really involved, but she saw a lot of things, and so
that's a very dangerous job. Yeah, the roads in Iraq. Yeah, if you're driving on the roads over there at that time, like that's probably the most dangerous place to be. So I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So that could be part of the reason why I was like, "Ooh, I'm choosing this book." Because
oh no, thank you. Yeah, you have how many people don't know anyone who was overseas. So very common. So.
Yeah, which is it's just crazy to think about for me, having some relatives who most of them chose to serve, but it's just that's a good point. I hadn't considered that before. So how long did you work on In Country prior to it being published? I know you mentioned prose, you're into that now, but it takes so much more time.
Yeah. How long did I work on that? Let me see. I mean, I think the first book I had was I came back from Iraq in 2004, and I wrote a lot during that time. And by the time my first book came out, it was 2012-ish or something. Yeah, I would just say a lot of the poems that I worked on after Iraq, some of them didn't go into my first book. And so some of those I've been working on for, uh, yeah, about 7 to 10 years. Other ones were much more new, where they were being revised during I'd say like a 4 or 5 year period, um, from 2000, I guess 2012 to maybe 2018. So yeah, anywhere from and some poem like the title poem actually in country. That title poem I wrote maybe 6 months before the book came out. So it is strange that the newest poem I wrote ends up being the first poem. And so, but all the other ones, they were anywhere from 2 or 3 years old to anywhere from even 10 to 12 years old. So, but in different forms. I save all my drafts. I need to stop doing that because it drives me crazy. But so I have drafts that are just, that are just maybe something I wrote in like 2005 or 2006 or something. And then I just did all these different versions, and I have a version from like 2015, and that's the one that I chose to put in the book or something like that. So just all across. I will say, trying to think about that. Yeah, it's hard to think about time because I can't remember. I'd have to think about each poem individually to think about, did I write that really recently, or is that old? But as far as the complete book itself, it all comes out in 2000 whatever 18, and yeah, but those poems have so many different like dates on like birth dates on them,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so,
Okay, that makes sense.
yeah.
Which one is your favorite in the collection?
Yeah, good question. I don't know if I've been asked that before. Hmm. Um. You know what? I'll just pick kind of a more quiet poem. It's just a very quiet poem. It's called Test Fire, and it's about kind of going out and we just would test fire in the middle of the desert and leave all this, brass shell casings, and they'd all disappear and everything. But I liked it just because it kind of, it's just a meditation on the physical landscape of the place, but it also shows, and I hope readers get this. I don't know if they do, but it just shows kind of the kind of ephemeral nature of being there. Just you're there, and you have all this expensive machinery and weaponry, and you're leaving your brass around, but then you just literally, you leave, and then basically the Bedouin come. People just take the brass, and the wind and the weather and the atmosphere kind of like take makes the tire tracks disappear, and everything's gone literally to dust. And so I didn't think that was too heavy of a metaphor, but it really just shows how kind of meaningless, um, how when you're there, it seems like the biggest thing in the world and so intense and in your face, but just our presence was just it meant so little to that place because of Iraq's history. I mean, even thinking about British soldiers being there after World War One and kind of saying they're going to liberate it. And so, and it also speaks to me. Like if I wrote that poem again, I'd probably talk more about kind of my own ignorance, but also just American ignorance of Iraq's history, because they just like they make America. I mean, Iraq is it's like the oldest country, and it makes Americans. It looks like our history is nothing, and so. But that's a normal American thing, right? We would never study like Iraq history. Yeah, so yeah, that poem Test Fire is like I do like it. The more I'm away from the book, I just a short little one. So,
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense too.
yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, it's that's what I was going to say. It's like you said, tire tracks and everything just going away.
Yeah.
Like dust in the wind.
Yeah.
Not to reference a song, but
no, literally, yeah, you're right. Literally, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just this tiny speck in history, really.
Yeah.
Speaking of music, I didn't have this written down, but other than the 50 caliber thing,
Oh, yeah.
is that the main reason for 50 cents?
Yeah, you're right. I'm
Because
glad you caught that. Yeah, that's because I think a lot of people don't catch that reference. But yeah, it's just that persona. Like he's a 50 cal gunner, and it is true. Like it's almost a nonfiction thing. But that song in the club, like it came out in '04, so people listened to it in Iraq. Like it was a big thing. Like it was a cool song. So
Yeah.
it was So it obviously is like it's true. Like it was in pop culture. But yeah, you're right that he's 50 cal gunner, but he likes 50 Cent. Like kind of a goofy little joke. I don't know.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right.
Okay. Okay, I was just curious because
Yeah.
that's interesting. But
Yeah.
There were a few poems that stood out to me in form as being different, like Suspicious Duffel Bag, LSA Anaconda. So I was just curious about that change because the stanzas are longer and the lines are longer too. It almost, not quite, but almost more in paragraph form. So I didn't know if there was a conscious reason for that or.
Yeah, I think just even with that Suspicious Duffel Bag, I wanted to. I think it was not only about the visual quality of it, because if I would have extended those lines, I would have had that poem might have gone on for 2 pages, maybe even 3 pages, and so I wanted it to be just visually, because and as you know, when you look at a poem, like the entire presentation of it visually like matters a lot. Like if you have to look on different pages, it just doesn't have the same effect. And so I wanted it to all occur on one page, and I wanted the lines to be longer in order to kind of to mirror the anxiety and suspense and just kind of terror of not knowing, what will explode or what's fake and what's real. And so I guess the longer lines kind of just they are more prosaic in a way, but they also kind of they speed up the poem. I always say like long lines speed it up because you're not dropping down. You're going across. So I wanted it to speed up, and there's a lot of moments in that poem where there's repetition and there's there's like a rhythmic quality that I tried to create to kind of show the just kind of maybe the speaker being afraid or feeling just scared because of this the unknown, whatever's in that literal bag, but also like what's in anything, what's buried under the ground and things like that. So I think and maybe and that's the thing, forms are arbitrary. I could have written that poem maybe with very short lines and maybe it would have had a similar effect, but yeah, I think it's trying to kind of match whatever the content is doing or work against it in a way if I feel that's productive. So yeah, just formal reasons speak to the thematic reasons, I guess, so.
And you mentioned anxiety and being afraid, and I read it kind of like it's like this running thought process that doesn't really stop.
Yeah.
So I totally get that. I was just curious your take on it because, like you, I'm more accustomed usually to reading prose. Mm-hmm. This is the first poetry class I've taken in a while. So I second guess myself anytime I read a poem. Yeah. So I just wondered what you thought of it. So what advice do you have for budding writers? I know I've read in some of your previous interviews, and you teach writing, that reading, is a big part of it. But I'm thinking specifically of the process too, not just reading and everything, but being brave enough to try to get your work out there, that kind of thing. What would you say?
Yeah, well, of course, beyond the reading, you're absolutely right. But when it comes to like getting your work out there and things like that, it's really just, and like I said, I tell my students, you have to have the thickest skin ever, and you have to be ready for rejection. It's just so competitive, and most any successful writer you talk to, they've dealt with rejection so much. I mean, they continue. I mean, I get rejections all the time, so I think it's just something that you have to kind of recognize. And I mean, if you read like Stephen King's book on writing, I mean, he was rejected for years and years and years and years. So I think he would just always like kind of pin the rejections on his wall, and they would just kind of stack up. And so I think it's important for writers to just, as long as you're writing what you want and you're reading and you're just pushing it forward, you really got to learn to shut off the outside noise, because too, it's like the world doesn't want anyone to write. The world wants you to go to the movies, or, oh, it's COVID now, but go outside and play and have fun and spend money and watch movies. And so I think everything will stop you from writing. So if you don't have the I guess the integrity or the discipline and patience to kind of do it every day. And when I say every day, that doesn't mean, of course, like you're writing something every day, but it's spending time with it. That might just mean like even on your way to work, thinking about what you're working on. Every writer is always like writing in a way, even when they're not physically doing it. Even they're thinking about it, or they're even being away from it. They're kind of subconsciously thinking about it. So I think it's just kind of having a thick skin, shutting off the outside world. Of course, you want to be attached to the world and like know what's going on, but you don't want to let it kind of interrupt the private space of your imagination and your process. Like you said, that process is important. So yeah, I'd just say things like that. So.
Yeah. Well, especially depending on the topic,
yeah,
you're so vulnerable in a way, like when you put yourself out there.
Mm-hmm.
You hope that people treat it with grace, but
you never know. Yeah, you never know. Yeah.
In the internet age, you never know.
Don't read what they say on the internet. Yes.
Yeah. Stay off of social media and stuff.
Yeah, that's another good advice. Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah. So back to the reading is very important, and I know I asked you about poets that you've been reading, but do you have specific writers or texts in general, whether it's poetry or not, that you would recommend as being helpful or particularly important for writers to pick up and pay attention to?
Yeah, I would say one that it's usually well known in poetry circles. It's just called The Triggering Town by Richard Hugo, who he was actually a World War II bombardier. How would they call it? Yeah, he was in the Air Force on bombing missions of World War II. But yeah, The Triggering Town is just a lot of it's prose, but it's his craft talks kind of on poetry, and it's all about these things we're talking about right now, about process and writing from memory and writing from experience, but also trying to figure out, what is the subject that you're really writing about, like the triggering subject and the subject that is produced by that, and also just the he kind of recognizes the importance of if you're fortunate enough to be in a school where you're learning poetry and learning writing, but also just the fact that it's really about yourself. You got to do what you want to do, and so I think The Triggering Town is good. I use a poetry handbook by Mary Oliver. That's a thin little book on poetry that's really helpful. But I would just say generally, there's so much contemporary work being published all the time that it's impossible to keep up. So that's one thing. But any anthology is that's like the best teacher, I would say. Just poetry anthologies. And I'm trying to think if I have one that a teacher gave it to me when I was in undergrad. It's over 12, 15 years ago, but it's called The Rag and Bone Shop of the Heart. And it's just got a lot of poems, it's a lot of 20th century poems that are really powerful. And so I go through that occasionally. So yeah, a few of those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. That's all I have actually, because some of what I wrote down I got to earlier.
Oh, that was great.
Thank
you very much. Very, very good question. Very interesting.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you. It was so nice talking to you. I've really enjoyed. I've really enjoyed In Country. So.
Thank you so much. Yeah, Bridget. Thanks for reading it, and say hi to Brad. But yeah, let me know if you need anything else. But I appreciate the questions and reading the interviews and stuff. So thank you for all that stuff.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Have a good night. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you guys for listening. I highly recommend In Country. I just love the way that Hugh Martin is able to or what he's done with his poems and his experiences in Iraq. They're just described in I would say like a beautifully disturbing way. I can't think of a different way to describe it, but I highly recommend it. Let me know if you guys have any questions or anything like that. And thank you so much for listening to my presentation.